Welcome to episode 31 of the Non-Fun Gerbils podcast. I'm Luke.
And I am George.
Today we are joined by Matt and Kyle from Piñata, which is essentially the core IPFS pinning service in the space. We take an awesome dive into what IPFS actually is, how it works, and why it's an important tool for storage and distribution of data on the future web that we are building. We then cover NFT metadata. Where are the images and descriptions and all the data associated with your tokens stored? Why this is important, and potentially who is responsible for it. At the end, we are joined by Lapin Mignon to read out some fantastic gerbil stories that came in for our collaboration, and we announce the winner. Super interesting and super fun discussions. We hope you enjoy them.
Welcome to the Non-Fun Gerbils podcast, the show about digitally scarce gerbils, non-fungible assets, and the growing decentralized economy.
Matt and Kyle from Piñata, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
It's great to have you guys on, and IPFS is something that is a hot topic in the space and an important one. So yeah, we're here to explore that today. Maybe we could start by you guys giving us a little bit of your background and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. So Matt and I are actually both from Omaha, Nebraska, if you can imagine that. And we both were interested in the blockchain space in 2017. Really, we're gravitating towards it, and found each other through a local meetup that I had started, and decided that we were just going to jump into the space, quit our jobs, and said, you know what, we're going to figure out this blockchain thing, however we need to do it. And so we started just building blockchain applications, mostly on Ethereum, building smart contracts and things like that at the time. So this is 2017, 2018. We were flying kind of all over, going to the ETH Waterloos of the world, the ETH Berlins, kind of all those hackathons, cutting our teeth on that type of stuff. And through that experience, what we figured out early on is that the majority of the data associated with blockchain still needs to be held off chain. But when you do that and you just use a traditional cloud infrastructure, what happens is there's no way to actually verify that data is what it's supposed to be. And so what everybody was using at the time already was something called IPFS, or the Interplanetary File System. And that network, that protocol solves that content verification problem. And so as we were building these applications at the time, we were having to spin up our own nodes, and we're doing a lot of that work, and figured, why can't we just solve this for everybody and focus on the IPFS side of things? So in late 2018, after winning or being one of the winners at the ETH Berlin hackathon, we launched IPFS, which end goal is to just be the easiest way to use IPFS.
Yeah, Kyle has practiced that introduction many times, so I'll let the man who's perfected it say it.
Maybe just break down. Matt is obviously the CTO and the technical wizard. He understands IPFS better than almost anybody. I would say he's been deep into IPFS for the last 3 years, really figuring out how to get across the network and make it scale and handle the explosion that is the NFT space today.
Awesome. So what is Piñata? Can you sort of give us that in a nutshell?
Yeah. So Piñata at its core is a IPFS pinning service. What that means is you can pay us to pin content or host files on IPFS nodes, and so we ensure that your content, whatever it is, whatever the files are actually on the IPFS network and can be basically called or downloaded, or whatever the situation is that you're trying to do with IPFS. We ensure that happens for our users. And so we are used by application developers, so we have an API, but then we are also used just by regular non-technical users as well. where they will come in and they will upload content, in a similar fashion to a Dropbox or something like that, where we have an interface for them to upload files, whether it's photos or videos or things like that, to the IPFS network, and then we ensure that they stay on our nodes for as long as they're a customer of ours.
Awesome. And what is IPFS? Can you explain that?
Yeah, I'll let Matt take that one.
Sure. Yeah, great question. So IPFS, or the Interplanetary File System, is a protocol that is made by a company called Protocol Labs. The vision of it and why it was called the Interplanetary File System is that we could theoretically have our files on Earth and then, someday Mars. And that Mars wouldn't need to continually call back to Earth to get update or to get the files every time it needed to load a web page, for example. And how it would do this is through what's called a content addressable file system. And this is kind of the magic of why IPFS and blockchain fit so well together. So when you upload something to IPFS, it's going to run it through this hashing algorithm, or the cryptography magic, as we like to tell people. And it's going to give you back this hash, or CID as it's officially called, content identifier. And then if you run the same piece of content through IPFS again, you're going to get that same CID back. This is very deterministic in nature. And then what happens is at any point in time, you can go ask any other node on the IPFS network, hey, do you have this content? And if somebody has it, then you get that content right back, and you're guaranteed to get back exactly what was initially uploaded. So basically tamper-proof, immutable files that are perfect for linking to from a blockchain.
And Matt, maybe jump in there and discuss how the traditional or the legacy web actually stores your files today, and why that doesn't work with blockchains or NFTs.
Yeah, that's a great thing to touch on. So the traditional web, think of any place that you store your photos or your videos, right? You're going to access it from example.com/myphoto.png or JPEG or whatever it is. And what happens if myserver.com decides that they want to delete your content behind the scenes, or change the underlying file that you uploaded? So now when you're looking for, myphoto.jpg, right, they may decide that they want to return you somebody else's photo, or maybe they've moved your file elsewhere and you can no longer access it. So this is a huge problem for people on the modern web. If you've ever encountered, like, say, a dead GitHub link or just a dead internet link anywhere for the non-developers, IPFS solves this problem, because instead of linking to where the file is being located at, you are instead linking to the file itself, or the ID for that file. And then as long as somebody on the IPFS network has that file, you're going to get it back. And again, you're guaranteed to get back what was initially uploaded. And that's why they call it the whole content addressable file system. So whether it's Kyle is hosting the content, whether Luke is, or George is, or Piñata is, right? As long as one of us is hosting that file, it's retrievable from anywhere on the IPFS network. And then whoever can get it to the user the fastest, they're the one that serves that content. So it's highly resilient and highly tamper-proof.
So there's a particular coin out there that I'm looking at that's currently 30% up today, having a bit of a run, called Filecoin. Tell us how Filecoin fits into the picture, and how it incentivizes people to sort of join the network.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So Filecoin, like IPFS, they're both protocols that are made by Protocol Labs, kind of this full suite of protocols. And they each serve different purposes right now. So Filecoin is going to be more of an archival layer for your storage. Think of like your long-term record keeping, where you want very cheap storage, but you may not need to access it quickly all the time. That's what Filecoin is really good for right now. You're basically taking that data, you're sealing it away in a vault, and you're paying miners around the world to keep it safe for you for a dedicated contract length of time. With IPFS is going to be more geared towards that fast content retrieval that you're going to expect from, say, like a modern web server. Think of it as kind of the caching layer for the Web3 layer. So Filecoin is going to be long-term storage. IPFS is going to be quickly retrievable storage. And they each serve their own unique purpose in the ecosystem.
And is it right that Filecoin uses IPFS?
Sort of. So they use the same underlying hashing mechanisms. So you can store IPFS content on Filecoin. However, you cannot retrieve IPFS content. You can't retrieve Filecoin content directly from the IPFS network.
Okay.
I will say yet, as that is something that I've heard is on the roadmap. So it'll likely come at some point.
So they are two separate networks at the moment?
Yes. Okay. Yes, they are.
Yeah, and one of the ways we like to look at IPFS is that IPFS can run across pretty much anything. So regardless of the storage medium that you want to have underneath, IPFS is capable of doing or is capable of storing on top of it. And so that's where we get excited, especially as it's related to NFTs, is that when you combine an NFT with an IPFS CID, you basically have the full range of possibilities open to store your content however you want to store that content. And so if you're concerned about permanence, you can choose for permanence. If you're concerned about speed, you can choose for speed. Regardless of what you want to do, having an NFT attached with an IPFS CID allows these NFT platforms, creators, and collectors basically the biggest available option as it relates to the files that they are attaching to their NFTs.
So when you say you can optimize for performance or for longevity, there, how would you go about doing one over the other? Yeah,
Matt, do you want to touch on that?
Sure. Yeah. So, like Kyle said, IPFS is a protocol, right? So as long as anybody is speaking the IPFS language, similarly to how us four are currently conversing in English, as long as somebody is speaking the IPFS language and can retrieve content and serve it, you're going to be fine, right? Some IPFS hosts may optimize for speed by caching their content in various locations around the world. So Piñata right now, we offer the ability to cache your content on multiple continents and put content as close to the users as possible so they can get it as fast as possible. If you're geared more towards, say, long-term archival storage, which is typically going to be less expensive, then you might opt for something like, say, Filecoin. You may not need to retrieve it immediately, but you can retrieve it at some point in time. It may take a couple hours to get, or a couple of days, depending on the size of your, how much data you've actually archived. But as long as we're all speaking that same IPFS CID language, you can really kind of optimize how you're storing that content and delivering that content in a way that best fits the user's use case.
So when I think about how to relate this back to NFTs, when we were first setting up the non-fungibles tokens, the NFTs themselves, all of 2 years ago, we didn't really know what we were doing or exactly how we wanted to lay them out. So I was kind of wary about creating a set standard and then not being able to change it. And I knew that we didn't want to host our metadata or images with the minting provider itself. If anyone was going to have control of it, over it, and the ability to change it or to let it go away, then we wanted to have that. And we knew we wanted to add attributes, but we weren't quite sure how. So we decided to start with hosting our own metadata. And Zach at Mintable was very helpful in us figuring out how to do that. And we knew that we could repoint to an image on IPFS later, and then be left with a 1 kilobyte JSON file, which we'd have to host, which is not much of a problem at all. Now later we did move to IPFS or Arweave. We use a mixture of the two. And that's where our JSON files are stored now. So if we ever make a mistake in minting, then that mistake is not changeable. But Another thing that put us off at the beginning is when you're pointing to IPFS for your metadata, you have to point to a gateway, and that gateway is subject to disappearing as well. And you could be left in the same situation where, yes, your content is on IPFS, but the gateway provider has gone away. And therefore your metadata then points to nothing because the gateway, because it's pointing to a URL, and that URL is a gateway which doesn't exist anymore. Is there a good way around this, or is there a solution to this?
This is a great question, and your timing of this is actually hilarious because there are quite a few Twitter threads that we've seen the past day or so that are actually discussing this exact problem. Let's break it down into a few different steps, right? So you've said if I link to a file in a gateway, and that gateway goes down, all of the NFTs break. Well, that's not good. We don't want that. So there's two solutions to this right now. One is going to be more of a long-term solution, and then one of them is going to be more of a Band-Aid solution that I still think is going to be needed long-term. So we'll discuss them both. The first one is going to be what I would call the correct solution, or like the best practice. And that's going to be in your NFTs, it's called the URI field. Think of this as like the link. You'll put in IPFS // your CID. This is kind of like how you go onto your browser and you type in HTTPS / the location you want to go. There are a few browsers that support this right now. I know Brave is one of them. So they will natively read this. And actually, a lot of NFT platforms, such as, say, like OpenSea, and also I think MetaMask is getting support for this as well. They're going to start to be able to read this protocol. This is kind of like best practice moving forward. So you don't need to point to a gateway. And what they'll do is they'll recognize, hey, this is an IPFS link or a CID. We'll let the user decide what gateway they want to go through. Maybe it's the IPFS.io gateway. Maybe it's their favorite IPFS platforms gateway, or maybe it's one they're running themselves, or maybe it's actually they're running an IPFS node in browser as part of the Brave browser. This is something they offer as well. The point I'm getting at is there's a lot of different ways that you can retrieve this content on the network, as long as you can recognize that it's a CID. So we talked about recognizing a CID here, and a lot of people didn't follow best practice when they were creating their IPFS NFTs a long time ago. And that's okay. People are constantly getting better and evolving, and we're learning new things. The easiest way that we're going to probably have to handle this is wallets and platforms and browsers by extension are going to have to recognize, okay, this is a gateway link. So maybe if it's examplegateway.com /IPFS / your CID, it's going to recognize that, and it's going to say, oh, there's a CID. We're going to strip it out of there, and we're just going to plug that into whatever way we want to retrieve the file from the IPFS network. So kind of like legacy support stuff. I realize that was a little bit of a technical side of things, but kind of what I'm trying to get to is that there are solutions for this that we can absolutely utilize as an industry moving forward here.
Well, let's say that IPFS.io goes down and disappears, and then OpenSea or your wallet can say, for example, read all URIs, and if there is IPFS.io in there, recognize that that's a CID afterwards, and then replace and redirect from there.
Yep. And what this will probably be turned into is some type of open source tool that projects can just kind of plug in.
Well, that totally makes sense.
Yeah. So from our perspective, it's kind of a little messy in the NFTs, but ultimately it doesn't prevent us from being able to go out and grab that content by the CID from the IPFS network, as long as it's hosted on the network, as long as it's available somewhere, we can grab that and get it.
So, speaking of hosting on the network, there's in Twitter thread that I was reading just 10 minutes ago, there's talk of IPFS files that are not being retrievable on many of the well-known platforms, which then have an IPFS link which is actually inactive. What's happening there when that happens?
So what's happening in this case is going to be basically nobody is hosting the content anymore. So the gateways can't find it. And that's really the most likely solution there. Another possibility would be that the content just can't be discovered. So IPFS is this big peer-to-peer network. And if the node that's hosting the content isn't set up correctly, maybe it's behind a bunch of firewalls, or maybe the example platform, which we will not name, is having issues with their infrastructure, right? That could be one of the reasons the content's not being found. On that note, just to clarify, and I'll let Kyle jump in here, this is actually why we talk about the importance of kind of having multiple places of hosting your content. While we at Piñata love to host lots of people's content, right? We also encourage people, similarly to how you want to have backups of your data on the internet. Host your IPFS content. Maybe host it on your own node and host it on the service.
Yeah, and we actually have an interesting blog out there from like 2 years ago where we kind of talk on this discussion of IPFS can be as centralized or decentralized as you want to make it. And IPFS nodes themselves don't actually understand if they're a centralized or a decentralized node, right? If the content is on the node and they can grab from that content, they will. And it's going to be whatever's the fastest to retrieve the content. And so there's, again, tons of flexibility with the IPFS protocol to make your application as centralized or decentralized as possible. But what this does hint at is kind of a subject that we love to talk about, which is ultimately who is responsible for NFT data. And what we mean by that is who's responsible for the file. And we kind of have always framed it as, is Da Vinci responsible for maintaining the Mona Lisa? And the answer to that is, of course not, right? The Louvre Museum at this point in time is the one that is ultimately responsible for taking care of that painting. And so what we've ran into in the space is figuring out how do you transfer that responsibility between different parties? Should the platform themselves be responsible for the data for the life of the asset? Should the creator be responsible? Or should ultimately the consumer or the collector of that NFT be responsible for it? And so what we think needs to happen in the space to really elevate it and create good NFTs out there is to just simply define who's actually responsible and when. So when a collector comes in and buys an NFT, they should understand that the minting platform that they are operating on might store it for them for 5 years. That's the guarantee that they make. We have a blog post about this called Who's Responsible for NFT Data? And we talk about it as a warranty, essentially, that they are guaranteeing that this file will exist for at least 5 years. After that point, if you're the owner of the NFT, you need to take responsibility for it, right? And so we don't really want to have an opinion on how that should be set up. The minting platforms, the creators, and the consumers are going to all have different wants and needs depending on the NFT type, right? There's different NFT types out there. Some are video, some are music. There's going to be different expectations essentially from the market, from the collectors on what to expect. And so what we get excited about with IPFS and the CID paradigm as it relates to NFTs is you can actually transfer responsibility between those CIDs. And so these platforms, these creators, and these collectors can actually figure out, ultimately who's responsible. And we kind of have this feeling that the person that's going to care the most about their NFT is ultimately the one who actually owns it at that time, right? And so when you think about NFT transferring from a platform to a collector, maybe they're still under that 5-year warranty that I mentioned earlier. But what happens when that warranty is up and they transfer it from that initial buyer to another one, right? When that person buys it, ultimately, they care about the file at that point and they want to be responsible for it. So through the IPFS CID, we think there's a lot of ability to solve this problem and take care of it, and then just kind of let the platforms and the markets and ultimately the consumer decide what makes the most sense.
That's a really interesting idea. And I suppose as long as the file is on IPFS, then it doesn't matter who's hosting it. So the owner can take over responsibility of making sure that they are at least hosting it. So there is at least one copy of it on the network. And I suppose even if it goes offline, as long as he has that file saved on his computer, he can always repin it back online again.
Yeah,
Yep,
so that's
exactly.
That's the coolest, some of the coolest stuff that we're seeing. So we have another blog out there called The Secret NFT, and we actually play with this paradigm of you generate that CID, but you don't actually put it onto the network, and so then you're not actually getting the file, which is useful, especially if you're a creator that wants to maybe play with the gas costs, make sure that you're minting at the right time, but you don't want to actually expose the content. You don't actually have to upload it until maybe it's minted, and then at that point it becomes alive, and the buyer can see what the file actually is. But continuing down the line, so if you go into the future, you can actually see a world where people start taking their content offline, so that you can't actually view it, and then if they ever want to sell it again, they can easily put it back online and kind of play. In our blog, we talk about it as submarining the files. You can basically submarine them, not make them visible. If that benefits you, if it doesn't, obviously you don't have to. But it really provides some very interesting kind of paradigms and ways to interact with NFTs instead of just always having them available.
I suppose apart from anything else, it can be quite efficient, as in if you've got your token ready to mint but you haven't quite finished the artwork, then you can get the token minted and then publish the artwork later. Or you know, as you say, you can make that part of the feature. It can be a surprise drop to people on a certain date. People could sell an NFT and say, I'm not going to release the artwork for this for 5 years.
Yep.
And but it's already the PID has already been generated. That's the hash. He can't change it.
To jump in there a little bit, you would have to finish the file or the image before you mint the token.
Yeah.
Because if you change that image, right, the CID would change.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of like the cool feature part of IPFS there, right? So if it did change, the buyer would know. They'd say, hey, this isn't what you sold me. This is a completely different file. And then people would be like, oh, my bad. Here's the original one.
Of course. So you can't, in that instance, you can't finish off the drawing, of course, whilst you're...
Yep.
But you could say have not bothered to actually upload it to an IPFS node, I suppose. That would
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and the transfer could happen entirely offline as well. You could have a secret thumb drive with this file that's flying across the world to art museums. It doesn't have to actually exist on the public IPFS network as long as you can verify the content is what you say it is.
Rather like, a lot of people in the crypto space keep their money on exchanges. There will be a lot of people who just keep their NFT, on NBA Top Shot or whatever. And I think one of the things about the NFT space is that we're going to get a spectrum of people from the exceedingly technical to non-technical, and one can imagine that unless you have some kind of sort of understood sort of traffic light system, like it's getting close to the time where you need to start hosting your own data, or you need to back up this file or something. It could end up being a bit of a sort of chaos. How do you actually see the communication happening to people in the NFT space about taking responsibility? Because it happens a lot in the crypto world, like, not your keys, not your money. We sort of need something similar in the NFT space, perhaps.
Yeah, so we've actually already seen kind of this paradigm playing out so we have over 17,000 users, and most of them are creators or consumer type collectors. And what they do to take control of that situation is they just come to us and they will just pin that content regardless of if it's nearing its time or not. And so in that case, we are already seeing people that are being proactive of this, and we're seeing those types of behaviors take place in the market where they want that control, they want the ability to ensure that their NFTs are going to exist, and they don't have to rely on anybody else to make that happen.
So you can sort of provide that service. So what needs to happen is the understanding needs to kind of ripple through the community that you've bought the NFT, but that's kind of only half the job. You actually need to go and secure it at some point in time. Go and secure your collection.
Yeah, and part of that is just making that as easy as possible. For most consumers that are non-technical, most collectors, they are going to not need to understand any of this at all, right? A lot of this should be happening in the background automatically for them. And so what we're really focused on is trying to figure out how to make that happen for these collectors. And so they shouldn't really have to worry about this at all.
So are you suggesting there that sort of you could have a tie-up with something like Argent, for example? So I have some NFTs on Argent, and they just, it's just like a wallet. They're just pulling the data and showing me the picture. Is it possible that I could spend a bit of ether and sort of just automatically have it done, processed through you guys, so that I don't have to worry about it again?
Yeah, that's absolutely a direction that it could go. From our perspective, as long as we know that the NFT exists and we can access the CID, then we can replicate that content for whoever wants it to be replicated.
Yeah, super interesting.
I suppose if one user comes and replicates one piece of content and pins it on your service, and then another person on their account then tries to pin it as well, that's easy from your point of view. You don't have to do anything extra. You have that one instance of it. You don't have to make a second instance, do you?
We let people do that, actually, if they want to. You can replicate your content multiple times on our system on multiple IPFS nodes for extra redundancy.
Or is that just ensuring that it's replicated on more than one node at a time?
Yep. So it's kind of like a backup system, but it's also a built-in speed layer as well. So if you have your content on multiple nodes in multiple parts of the world, that content can get to the people who want to see it faster.
I suppose that across the internet, that would potentially make everything a lot faster. I don't know. Yeah. How does that compare to the way that Amazon does things?
That's a long answer.
I think maybe just touch on how the network grabs content, can grab content from multiple nodes at the same time,
sure. Yeah. So there's two phases of IPFS. There's the discovery phase, where the node has to find where the content's at, and then there's the download phase, or the retrieval phase, which the node knows where the content's at, and then it has to retrieve that content. So you can optimize for both of those. I will say, and it kind of depends on which one you're optimizing for. If you have multiple nodes that have the same piece of content, you can actually pull from all of those nodes in parallel. So think of it as like peer-to-peer boosted download speeds.
It's like torrenting it, is it?
The same underlying technological principles, yes. But for more legal purposes, as we like to encourage.
Yeah, I mean, if you download a Linux distribution, that's legal torrenting, isn't it?
Yeah. We try and focus on our end. We try and focus on the legal applications of the peer-to-peer nature of things. Peer-to-peer kind of got a bad rap back in the days because people were they were being bad about it. They're kind of abusing a good technology, but like all technology, you can use it for both good and bad. And we're really excited about how this type of technology is being utilized in such a positive manner from the Web3 space.
So what does IPFS look like outside of the NFT space? Is there a much broader kind of use case for it?
Yeah, there really is. There's a lot of different use cases there. One of them is going to be websites. People are starting to host websites on IPFS using something like this. Is going to be a great example of how we actually got linked up.
Yes.
Luke, do you want me to tell them the story of how we came here today? Sure. So a few years ago, I was experimenting with ENS, or the Ethereum Naming Service, which is, think of it as a domain registrar that exists on blockchain. So GoDaddy on Ethereum, probably the easier example of that. And then the power there is that it's, it's never going to go offline. Ethereum is this global registrar that isn't controlled by a single entity. So ENS allows you to register a domain name on the Ethereum naming service, and then you can use different browsers to look up, hey, what content does this Ethereum domain point to? We were doing some technical research here, and my wife and I had just bought some gerbils from the local pet store to make our new friendly home companions.
Good choice. Good choice.
They're fun. So I bought gerbils.eth. That was my testing domain name. You guys can probably see where this is going. And poor Luke messaged me the other day, 2 years later, and said, "Hey, some domain pirate jacked our non-fungibles.eth domain name because it expired. Could we possibly buy your domain name?" And I said, "Well, sure. I noticed you have a podcast. Let's talk." So here we are. Here we are today.
Yeah.
So that's one use case of IPFS
is getting on podcasts, right? You can the best NFT podcast out there. Get you on there. We have other use cases that we have out there are 3D assets, large files, 3D assets, gaming assets. We have, I guess, kind of serverless applications that are using us. We have IoT data. We have pretty much, if it's data and if it's a file, it can be uploaded to IPFS. And I think what, the coolest thing is that I don't think is talked about enough is that is generating a CID, right? So any of this data that's being created out there generates a CID, and ultimately that CID can be plugged into an NFT, right? And so that connection between the CID and the NFT is going to be strong, and it's going to grow stronger as the amount of data actually ends up on IPFS itself. And so that's where we get really excited, is because absolutely anything can be uploaded to IPFS, and by default, that means that absolutely anything can be an NFT. So from that perspective, it's quite exciting.
Yeah. To add on to that a little bit too, the general theme I kind of want to poke on there is, so NFTs in IPFS, right? Or websites in IPFS, DeFi in IPFS. Basically, off-chain data as a whole is really where IPFS is shining. So any situation that you are saying to yourself, wow, I have too much data for me to put on chain, that's where IPFS is going to come in and make your life a lot better as a Ethereum application developer, or any blockchain developer. IPFS can work with any blockchain in existence or without a blockchain at all.
Yeah, and it's extremely cost prohibitive. If all the artists wanted to put all of their data on chain, it just wouldn't be possible. I'm not sure what it would cost.
Yeah, you're looking at about thousands of dollars per megabyte or something like that.
Yeah, it would just be absolutely insane. I've got to add, actually, that the user experience of pinning just a file on Piñata is so much better than logging into a S3 bucket on Amazon, and then uploading the file into the right folder, and then setting the permissions to be public. And that process is a pain. I was like, oh, okay. But when I log into Piñata, just literally just drag and drop, and then it's done, and then you've got your link. It is actually more user friendly at this point.
Yeah, we're really proud of how much time we've spent on ensuring that it's as easy as possible. So we have the API side of things where developers can come in and they can be very technical. But then we do have the user interface where it's super simple to just upload whatever file or whatever data that you want to, and then generate that CID, and then ultimately do whatever you want to. So we try to keep that as simple as possible. If you start adding too much stuff, it starts getting confusing again, and then it's not as usable as it needs to be.
And so, how's it going for you guys at Piñata? Are you seeing, real growth? Are you tracking the growth of the NFT space? Are you seeing a large increase in people coming to your site to to pin their content, or is it? Are you more sort of behind the scenes in terms of minting applications and that kind of thing, or maybe a bit of both?
No, we're definitely right in the middle of this explosion. So I think 2 weeks ago we were at 10,000 users, and now we're at 17,000 or 18,000 somewhere in there. And so we're seeing massive growth. And then so that's on the user side. On the pinning side, it's tracking the same. So we have a lot of files that are being stored on us, and this is all driven by the NFT explosion. So.
And where can I find an NFT Piñata donkey?
So I actually, for a lot of my tutorials, I ended up creating an NFT Piñata. There's
they're very rare by the sounds of it.
Yeah, maybe now that I'm talking about it, I should probably go maybe raise the price on it or something. Yeah, but we created a 3D. So I was messing around back. This would be about a year ago on crypto voxels, just trying to figure out the NFT space back then. And I created a tutorial on how to create a voxel NFT, and ended up just kind of creating a piñata of it. So they are out there and they are available, and they're even in 3D. So,
awesome.
So we'll have to hunt one down, Luke.
Yeah, there's going to be a rush on those for sure.
There's only one.
The one, yeah,
super rare.
It's rareable than the crypto kitties.
Yeah.
So what's next for you guys? What have you got lined up? What's your roadmap look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing that we are most focused on is ensuring that NFT files are simple and easy to use for both the platforms, creators, and the collectors themselves. And so we just want to ensure that the file infrastructure for NFTs is operating the way it's supposed to be. These conversations that are happening on Twitter that we see, we want to ensure that those thoughts and those problems in the space are being taken care of. So our main focus is ensuring that those files exist for both, or for the platforms, the creators, and ultimately the collectors, and just making that as simple as possible. So really, it's all about ensuring that the content is fast, the content is stable, ensuring that you get what you're supposed to. All those types of things is really what we're focused on, and kind of elevating the NFT space so that they have the right practices underneath, and we're solving for kind of the underbelly of what the NFT space currently has going on.
And do you have any sort of advice for? I suppose we've covered creators. What about collectors? How can they check? Because I have a fear that in a few years there's going to be a lot of self-hosted metadata disappearing, and a lot of people are going to get burnt, and then that's when people are really going to start caring. What can people now who are aware do to protect themselves when they're checking what they're buying?
Yeah, so I don't really expect them to obviously go onto like a chain explorer and try to grab that CID or something like that. So from that perspective, for the end collector, if they're non-technical, that might be too much of an ask. But what we've seen a paradigm is people are basically using IPFS links for unlockable content, and that will just become available to people once it's unlocked. And so they can just grab that and actually pin it on Piñata, make it simple. They just grab the link and can replicate it on us. So in that paradigm, it's actually very simple, something very intuitive to most people. However, on the other side of that, it does need to be easier for the end collector.
Yeah, because I find that it's quite difficult, on some marketplaces to actually find out where the metadata is even hosted, and there's no simple way of looking that up. And maybe there is, but I just haven't found it.
Yeah, and we spend a lot of time working with these platforms as well to ensure that they're using best practices. We don't expect them to understand the IPFS network as deeply as we do, but we love to share best practices of how to implement it and ensure that they're doing the best standards that they possibly can.
And what do you? So we haven't really we skimmed over it earlier, and I mentioned Arweave, and I might cut this into the earlier conversation actually. But how is Arweave different, and how does that compare when you put it up against IPFS or say Filecoin?
Sure. Yeah, I can take that. So we talked a little bit earlier in the podcast about choosing the best storage solution for your content. We talked about how IPFS is the public protocol is wanting to fast kind of retrievable data with the CID, and then Filecoin is going to be more archival storage. Where Arweave fits into the mix there is going to be people that want to pay for their content to live forever. Now, this is a trade-off. Rather than slowly paying for something over time, maybe you're not sure if your NFT is going to sell. If you're for sure that you want something to exist forever, you'll pay a high premium, but your content, according to Arweave's white paper and the way they've set things up, should theoretically exist for around, I think, 200 years is what they've said. So it's very much a trade-off there, and kind of what you're looking for in terms of your storage and how, what you need out of it. And then in addition to that, though, we still think that the most important thing here, though, is going to be that IPFS CID. We know we've seen that Arweave has dabbled a little bit into IPFS with this IPFS to Arweave thing they've set up. And we're big fans of that. We'd like to see more of these storage solutions integrating this IPFS CID into their retrieval mechanisms, because then you truly can choose the best storage mechanism that fits your need. And as long as it fits within this one cohesive standard that IPFS is becoming within the DWeb, everybody really wins there.
Yeah, and so there's kind of an underlying assumption that permanence is the ultimate goal for NFTs. And because we have people coming from the file side perspective and now kind of porting over to the NFTs, that's not something that actually is universally true for everything. And I would actually say for most NFTs, permanence isn't the absolute goal. So from that perspective, IPFS again allows you to choose how permanent or impermanent you actually want your files to be, and gives you that flexibility and that option moving forward. So again, that's why we're huge advocates of CIDs, IPFS CIDs connected to NFTs, and then choosing the storage layer underneath that makes the most sense for you.
Which is really useful if you're Banksy and you want to digitally shred one of your NFTs.
Yeah, absolutely. Or, maybe, so one of the things to think about is we see absolutely massive files on our side. So we can see, hundreds of gigabytes, and storing that forever is also kind of unwieldy a little bit, and paying for that upfront can be a lot of cost. And so that might not be what, the creator actually wants. They might just want to upload it, attach it to an NFT, sell it, and that person downloads it, and then ultimately, they have it on their computer or whatever the situation is. So we see just a ton more flexibility by using this IPFS NFT paradigm.
That's an interesting concept about having a one-off sale, one-off piece of content not continuing its existence on the network. Yeah, I wonder how and when that will get used.
Yeah, we coming from the IPFS side of things, we just haven't had this. We've just understood how the protocol works and then have applied that to NFTs. So we've just had a little bit of a different perspective on how we can actually use these CIDs as they attach to NFTs, and being able to submarine them or however you want to call it, where they kind of disappear for a while and they can pop back up, or interesting things like that. Again, the paradigms and the concepts that can be created out of that are pretty interesting and pretty cool.
When you have a token and the URI links to an API rather than a specific IPFS file, for example, what are the implications of that? Is that a bad thing?
I will say 95% of the time, or 99% of the time, this is probably going to be a bad thing. I'm sure there's some novel use case where this is going to be crazy that, it's super cool. But Most of the time, what you're referring to here is they're going to be pointing to, an API, a centralized server somewhere that's behind a domain that if they ever go offline or if they change anything behind the hood, right, what you're getting back from that API it's not guaranteed. They could completely switch what they're returning to you behind the scenes. One of our favorite examples of this that we saw recently was this guy, this artist that he put up a bunch of images as NFTs and he sold them all. And then a few days later, he changed all of the images behind the scenes to pictures of rugs. And he announced this on Twitter as him pulling the rug, from underneath this NFT paradigm. And we thought this was a beautiful example because, it just shows exactly what can happen when you're pointing to these, these servers and these. It shows what can happen when you're pointing to the location of something rather than what the content actually is.
Yeah, except it probably made them more collectible.
Yeah, I would say you're probably correct there in this one use case, but
yeah, the first one through the door becomes collectible. Everyone else, it's actually a rug pull.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, I love this idea that we're gonna have NFTs long term that were basically just hacks to break the system, and ultimately they are going to be the more valuable NFTs long term.
Well, that corresponds to the physical world when they mint coins and there's a mistake in the minting process and they have to recall like the 200 coins that have a mistake on them, and 5 of them get out into the public hands, and then those 5 are sought after for year after years to try and find them. But I totally get what you're saying there. It's really fascinating to sort of see what's going on behind the scenes, deeper down in the technology stack, and because for so many of us, we really are just skimming marketplaces, seeing images, getting caught up in the hype sometimes, and sort of we don't naturally spend too much time thinking about what's really going on behind the scenes and how and what best practice could be. So what you guys are doing is critical, really, to the space and especially to the NFT space. So yeah, thanks so much for coming and telling us all about it.
Yeah, no, we appreciate the time and thank you for the kind words.
So George, on to...
Hi.
Oh.
I said hello.
Oh, very good. Okay. Right.
I was just responding. Carry on. Start again.
It's going to be one of those sessions, isn't it, where
Probably.
the flow is flowing nicely. Okay. So, George, on to gerbils.
Yep.
We have a special guest that's come to join us to talk about the gerbils.
Dun, dun, dun.
Lapin Mignon, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hi, George. Hi, Luke.
It's lovely to have you here, especially as this gerbil is designed by you.
Yeah, it was such. We'll discuss about it. But it was such a fun collaboration, guys. I enjoy it a lot. I was just giggling, every time I was, I will talk about it later. But every time, every process of every step of the process was just really fun.
That's awesome to hear.
So we discovered you a few months ago and absolutely loved your work. And actually, it was in the Pranksy Christmas calendar where 2 of your pieces were sent out, or 2 versions, and I just thought they were fantastic. And was that how long have you been in the space before that, or was that your entry?
Oh gosh, it's a 2-part question, because basically I started to go in the NFT back in 2019, but it was the additional app. But I didn't really realize what was NFT at that time. So it was basically like an Instagram type of application, and you were able to exchange, with other, some artwork. It was brilliant. So there was a little bit of this community. And then I did it for 6 months, and then the application closed. And basically, I was like, okay, so that's it. I knew there was something on OpenSea. Every time we were, minting something, there was something on OpenSea. But yeah, I didn't really realize, really what was the NFT. And then back in July, one of my basically I get in touch with one of my friends back in July 2020, and basically he told me, say, oh, you should come back in NFT. I say, yeah, but the application is gone. He say, yeah, I will show you. You can go on different. You can go on Rarible, you can go on non-origin. I was like, what's going on? And this is when I realized, this type of thing were being sold, on the market, because at that time, back in 2019, basically, we were exchanging things freely. It was free to mint as well. So I think I can say I probably started really, like seriously back in July 2020. And I said, okay. And I started on Rarible and had a lot of fun. The NFT community is just awesome. So yeah. And then back in December, Pranksy asked me if I can do this advent calendar, and it was a huge opportunity, and I wanted to do something a little bit, like very Lapin, because I saw few names, and I was like, wow, what a pressure, because there were a lot of big names, in the calendar, and I said, okay, what should I do? And I'm like, okay, you know what, I would probably do something like a proper cute illustration, that shows a little bit of my world, something, that tells a little bit of story when you have a look at it. I don't tell any story, but when you look at it, you can make yourself, the story in your mind. And this little wolf looking at the moon a little bit on his own, because I was thinking that a lot of people will spend Christmas during lockdown, on their own, basically. But looking at the moon and basically knowing that, there is a lot of people looking at the moon at the same time, and basically you're not alone. So it was the spirit of this little wolf, for the Pranksy calendar.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
glad you like it.
Yeah, it's so good, and it's so cool that it was Additional that brought you in. So we've got Jake Bruckman to thank for that, and Fanny Lacoube.
So
Yeah,
you know them. So they already been on the show.
Jake Bruckman's been on. We haven't had Fanny on, but we do know her. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, Fanny was the one back in 2019. Say, hey, come. I saw what you are doing. Come on the additional app. Yeah. She's been my. I say it every time, my white rabbit. In the one I follow. To fall in the rabbit hole.
She's awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Well, so shall we read out some of these entries, which have been
Yep.
they've been actually quite a different sort of class of entry this time. It's been very, very cute and quite obscure. Yeah, because we haven't done gerbil along this sort of theme before. So yeah, that was a good suggestion. So at Rude Moose, Super Sparkle Gerbil. The world is made up of all sorts of gerbils, heroes, villains, and a spectrum comprised mostly of an unremarkable grey furry blur in between. Mostly, anyway. As with everything in the world, there are some exceptions. For example, Super Sparkle Gerbil. Powers include never-ending sparkle supply, great for adding decorative flair, and also blinding trolls. Deathliest death glare that can only ever be seen once. Nauseating optimism and faith in gerbil kind. More glitter bombs for good measure. Exceptionally skilled at killing houseplants, booping bots, and squelching spammers. Sass. So much sass. Are these the powers of a superhero or a villain? Look, sometimes the lines blur a bit, and no one likes a judgmental gerboa. She's got a flowy cape, just roll with it.
Very nice description.
Certainly sounds like a hero to me, I think.
A lot of powers.
A lot of powers.
Yes.
Sass. Sass is a power.
Sass.
Sassy. It's a heroine.
And never-ending sparkle supply. Yeah, I like that. That sounds very Rude Moose as well. Actually, is this a self?
It's quite good. Yeah, it could be.
Is this just your alter ego Rude Moose? Perhaps. Yeah, I could see that.
Squelching spammers. She does quite a lot of that, doesn't she?
She does.
Mm-hmm.
She does all of these things, I think.
All-round superhero.
All-round superhero. Not sure about the death. Yes. Okay. Well, thank you very much, superhero. Rude Moose, thank you very much.
Okay, so number 2 is at Alan Falcon. Meet spineless gerbil, able to heroically squeeze into and coldly squeeze out of any tight situation, but still unable to stand up to his overbearing, non-fungible fathers.
Wow.
I mean,
Can you imagine him?
How would you have drawn spineless gerbil?
I think like something super, like a slimy on the floor, a slimy gerbil. Okay, that would be for our second collaboration.
Okay, that can be that. I feel like actually we need to one day make a load of the gerbils that never were. Like,
yes.
They need to be dark and evil gerbils that never quite made it to be a non-fun gerbil. Maybe they're the fun gerbils.
This would be fun.
Okay, number 3, at Carla McJ. Everyone let out a sigh. Why, oh why, was gas so high? The clouds lingered, our mood was grim. It was looking like the miners would win. Out of nowhere he appeared to the masses. Before us stood the gerbil of gases. My gas is pure gold, a gift from above. It will fuel the network, let's share the love. Artists and collectors came forth to rejoice. Gas gerbil, our hero, the only choice.
Beautiful.
That's so cool. That's a great. That's how did that one not win? I mean, because like everyone listening right now totally relates to gas gerbil.
That's true.
Oh, that's a cracker.
Yeah, we need a gas gerbil now.
100%.
To help us.
To save pending gerbil.
Well, yes, exactly. To save pending gerbil. Good call there on the back catalogue, Luke. Like it.
I would love a button, with a gerbil, and you click on it. You say gas saving gerbil.
That needs to happen.
It instantly transforms your token over to another network, another blockchain.
Oh yeah, we need that one.
Gasless blockchain transfer gerbil. Great stuff. Well, listen, next up,
nice.
What have we got?
Is it the number 1?
I think
It
so.
is, yeah. So the winner.
Dun dun dun.
Okay, at Snail 0x. Fiona Gerbil Hamsterface, aka Fondue Gerbil, Superpower Melting Cheese, backstory. Fiona was a sweet, mild-mannered gerbil who lived in a carefree life at number 23 Sugar Lane Road in London. Her owner were Mr. and Mrs. Brown. Wait, is Snail stealing this from Paddington Bear? Anyway, one day, Mr. and Mrs. Brown were having a small 70s theme party balloon. The evening of the party arrived, and Fiona was placed safely on top of a bookcase above a fondue set. But alas, Mr. Brown's coat uncaught the cage and catch without him noticing. Whilst everyone was dancing, Fiona crawled out of the cage and fell into the fondue with a sploosh. Quick! Cried Mrs. Brown. Mr. Brown pulled poor Fiona out of her tail. She was covered in cheese fondue from head to tail. To everyone's relief, Fiona was in shock, but overall fine. Or was she? Later that evening, while the Browns were asleep, Fiona woke up in a sweat. A transformation had happened. Her DNA had completely changed. This is basically just Spider-Man now, isn't it? Fiona had changed into Fondue Gerbil, able to melt cheese and turn slowly in a circle. And a superhero was born, fighting the injustice of British cheese and plain hard cheese everywhere.
I I love how the writer has apologized at the end. I'm sorry, I just wanted a gerbil NFT. Apology accepted.
Apology accepted, and you are now a gerbil author as well.
Indeed. Indeed. The ability to make British cheese better won the day. Congratulations.
I did love the idea of the ability to turn slowly in a circle being a superpower.
Critical superhero power there.
So, what was your idea behind this story and your design?
So I think it's because I have a strong sense of humor, and when we discuss about the film, like superhero, a gerbil being a superhero with silly power, basically I wanted some, I had in mind, something like with a lot of fun and derision as well. And I think in this story there is a lot of this, like it's just ridiculous, this Fiona, a gerbil, who has this superpower about a cheese and now becoming a superhero to defend the British cheese. Come on. How not to pick that one? But for me, everything was falling into places when I read it, because basically all the stories I read, in the thread, is basically you can really picture, everything falling in places, and picture the big scene, your gerbil, and everything, everything's going around. And this one really make me laugh, and I was like, yeah, this is what deserves, the gerbil as a superhero. It's this type of silly power, but anyway, it's very serious. It will save the world, and it will save the British cheese, which is important to me. I'm French and I love cheese.
Perhaps the most unbelievable part of it is that Fiona would be defending British cheese and not French cheese.
Well,
but maybe French
Exactly.
cheese doesn't need saving, so maybe that's the
British
that's the difference.
British cheese needs improving. Yeah, I mean, it's according to this, it's an injustice.
Yes, and I will.
That's quite strong words.
Yeah. So this is why I think it was important for me to say, okay, yeah, it needs a little bit of counter power. Here it is. This is the drawing, of a British cheese.
Well, you've definitely captured Britain in the image. Many London icons.
Yeah, I lived in London as well for a couple of years. So for me, it was like, okay, let's, it was a little bit of nostalgia, and in the in all the landscape and so on. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. I was giggling basically the entire process. I was doing this drawing. I had a lot of fun. I was like, yeah.
Well, that's half the joy of not only the NFT space but also the non-fun gerbils. Is you just no idea. You could never possibly predict what it is that you would be saying or drawing, as clearly this rendition of these descriptions will attest to. But that's part of the joy, isn't it? You just flying cheese throwing gerbils over a London landscape.
This is a creativity machine.
It is. It's extraordinary, the creativity that it's pulling out of the Twitter sphere.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and it's been such a pleasure to do a collaboration with you.
No, it was a real pleasure to do this artwork with you. I mean, the stories that came back were all brilliant. It really feels that imagination has no limit, and I think once again, with your stories and everyone contributing to it, it really shows that people are going just limitless, and it was really nice to read. I really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed, as well, drawing this fondue gerbil as well. So thank you very much for inviting me, on the non-fun gerbil. I just loved everything, and the community, behind the gerbil, and it's just a lot of fun. So thank you so much.